It's coming up on 06:45 on a Thursday morning, and I'm looking out the window, just starting to get light. A little bit ago, I looked at the eastern horizon, and the sun was lit, kind of. I don't know, they call that twilight or something. But anyway, yeah, maybe another half an hour, the sun's going to cross the eastern horizon, and it will be morning. That makes me wonder. It makes me ask myself this question: What pointless and petty argument is Bunny? Her YouTube channel is Bunny and Beyond Van Life. What petty and pointless argument is she going to engage in with a law enforcement officer? Or in this case, it might be a federale. Now, Bunny is in Mexico. She's getting some type of dental work. I know a lot of Americans that do that. A lot of Americans will go down to Mexico to get various medical procedures performed down there because it's a lot cheaper. I've often wondered how safe those were, but I'm guessing the doctors down there know their stuff. Now, I don't know if Bunny knows any Spanish. Now, I've talked to my customers that go down there, and some of them do know Spanish, and a lot of them don't. But, I was born in Phoenix. I've grown up in the valley here. You don't grow up in the Southwest U.S. without learning a little Spanish. I thought if Bunny doesn't know any Spanish, I'll give her some handy phrases that she might use. Now, you might find there are cops down there that will pull people over. Sometimes they'll put up phony roadblocks, and they're kind of an extortion type thing. Now, Bunny might use the phrase, "No tengo mucho dinero," if if a cop tries to take her down for money. No tengo mucho dinero. Now, if she goes to a restaurant, she might use the phrase, "No me gusta pescado." Now, me personally, I don't care for fish. I do like tuna fish and fish sticks. We'll get that in another discussion. Now, if she goes to a bar, she might use the phrase me gusta mucho la cerveza fría, or she might use me gusta mucho sexo con mujeres. Yeah, be careful with that one. That might get you something maybe you'd enjoy that. I got no idea. Just talking to that. Me gusta mucho. Well, for me personally, yeah, me gusta mucho sexo con mujeres. I don't know if I'm saying that right. So, Mohair wants to teach me the proper pronunciation of that. Let me know. Me gusta mucho sexo con mujeres. I think I'm saying that wrong. But most Spanish speaking people will get it. Now, the Spanish they speak in Mexico is a little bit different, and some of the words are a little bit different than the Spanish they speak here here in Phoenix, or the Spanish they speak in LA, or the Spanish they speak in Argentina, or in Spain. There's just a few words. Same thing with English. English is the English they speak in Australia or Britain is a little bit different. Some of the words are a little bit different. Just the way that language is, or when it's spoken around the world, it's a few words have slightly different meanings. One thing I was going to cover, I've covered it yesterday. I've covered it a couple of times now. I was in Nogales. Well, there's two Nogales. There's a Nogales on the U.S. side. There's Nogales in Mexico. But anyway, went over the Mexican side, half hour or something like that. But anyway, I saw a sign that said, vehicles with commercial plates. So I had a 3/4 ton service truck, like an F-250. Anyway, I had commercial plates on there, and I thought it just meant all vehicles with commercial plates. So I got this line. It was all lined with produce and fruit and like that. After about 5 minutes, I realized that by commercial plates, they meant the big stuff, the big 18 wheelers. So I said, well, I'm just going to get in the line for the regular passenger vehicles. I tried to make a U-turn, and one of these federales, saw me doing it. He come over and I said something silly to him, and I don't think he understood me. But I think he realized what I was doing, that I realized that I was in the wrong line. That was kind of interesting. Let's see, the last thing I'm going to cover here. Yesterday I was covering the Pleasant Valley Wars. It's something that was covered by Steve. His YouTube channel is Sidetrack Adventures. But anyway, he was covered because one of the structures that was, the hideout house for one of the families that was involved in the Pleasant Valley Wars was there at Pioneer Village. Steve didn't actually go to, the Pleasant Valley. It's up by Young, Arizona. I need to get up there and just kind of look around, maybe do a 1 or 2 night thing. I'm going to touch on something else here in a second. But anyway, there was the house that this family, I don't know if all the family was killed or just the male members. I'm gonna get to that in a second also. But anyway, this house is in Pioneer Village, along with quite a few other structures. And if you Pioneer Village is it's they've got buildings that were moved there from other locations that were, let's say somebody has a property, they don't care for any of the structures there. They just got a house that's been there from the 1800s, and they say, well, they tell the people at Pioneer Village, they said, look, if you want it, if you can move it out of here, you can have it. Pioneer Village has got a bunch of structures like that. Buildings that were moved there from other buildings of historic value that were moved there from other property. The Goldfield Ranch is the same thing. Goldfield Ranch is another tourist spot that none of the buildings are original to there. I need to get over Goldfield Ranch sometime too, because it's on my bucket list of places to visit. But anyway, back to the Pleasant Valley Wars. Now I'm thinking, now that's the reportedly somewhere between, I don't know, 20 to 50 people were killed, depending upon what source I guess you want to listen to. That were all the male members were killed off. The very last is between the Tewksburys and the Grahams. Now there is a Graham County, Arizona. Now I don't know if that was named for the Graham family or a different Graham. I'm sure it was named for a Graham, someone named Graham, but I don't know if they were related to the Pleasant Valley Wars or not. It's kind of like the Hatfields and McCoys, and I'm gonna get to that in a second again. But anyway, it was just primarily for the male members, that could act as blood feud between the two families. I'm guessing a lot of the widows probably, weren't executed because that wasn't part of their style to take out the widows, the females of the families. And I can just imagine what it'd be like for be a young widow, losing her husband to this feud. She goes, what the hell do I do now? Or I can stand an older chick that has lost her husband, maybe one or a couple of his brothers, and maybe this chick has lost a couple of her older sons to this feud. I can just see her, maybe she was a matriarch, maybe maybe the guy was running one of the ranches, and now she's saddled with maintaining one of these ranches, one of these cattle ranches, or maybe a sheep ranch. Yeah, I don't know if she stays on, tries to run it by herself, tries to find people to help her run it, or maybe she just says, "F it, I'm out of here. This feud is just made such an impact on my life. I want no part of this feud. I'm out of here. I'm going to put State 48, in the rearview mirror, or well, rearview mirror was probably premature. Whatever she's looking at." On her horse as she's running into the rising sun or into the setting sun, whatever the case may be. I don't know. Now the last member of one family died an old man, like in 1904, something like that. He died of natural causes. Just kind of lucky enough to survive all that and live through all that. But I can just I don't know why. Well, no, what if you go back to the Hatfields and McCoys? I really haven't studied that, but I know a little bit about it. They would periodically draw these truces. There would be these long text truces where they would agree to cease hostilities that would last for a short period of time, and then it would start up again and kill a few more people. I don't know why the Tewksburys and Grahams couldn't sit down at the negotiating table and put all this behind them and say, well, look, figure out something, where maybe they could have cattle on one part, one range and sheep on other range, or however. I don't know why they couldn't come to some type of mutual agreement rather than kill each other. I don't quite get that, but that's they just decided to settle their differences with a bullet, just the way they choose to deal with it, I guess. Sometimes it's hard to put your brain in the mindset of somebody that lived 100 years ago. But again, I need to get up to actual Pleasant Valley, kind of maybe spend a night or two up there. Hey, maybe there's some of the surviving. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are people living in some of these little communities that say, "Hey, that this was a story. This was a story. This was part of my family. My great grandpa lived through this, or my grandma, my great grandma was one of these chicks that lost her all her family to this." or most of her family, because she'd have to have at least one surviving heir to have somebody to somehow you have some kinfolk to survive to the present day. You follow what I'm saying here? There's probably a few people around the day that can trace their kinfolk back to this Pleasant Valley War. I'm sure they've got some interesting tales. If some chick is a history nerd like I am, especially for State 48. Some chick is a history nerd too. You don't have to be born here. You don't have to be interested in having anything extracurricular with me. Just somebody interested in going through the Pleasant Valley and covering some of the history that went on there, or maybe there's some other part of the state. Maybe you're Chiricahua Apache, and Geronimo was your great grandpa or whatever. Oh, I'd love to camp out in the Chiricahuas. I mean, far away from that. What's going on with Fanatic Guthrie down there, because that's where she's at. She's in the Chiricahuas. That's that mountain range just outside of Tucson. I said if some chick is a Chiricahua Apache and interested in sharing some of her experiences with me, yeah, I'd love to do that. We can make some interesting YouTube videos. Again, not necessarily anything romantic or extracurricular. Just two history nerds showing some history from State 48. Okay, love y'all. Hey, teach me how to say goodbye in Chiricahua Apache. I'll leave that word up to you.